Our scripture this morning is from the beginning of the 6th chapter of the book of Mark. Jesus left that place and came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him. On the Sabbath, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astounded. They said, "Where did this man get all this? What is this wisdom that has been given to him? What deeds of power are being done by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary and brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. Then Jesus said to them, "Prophets are not without honor, except in their hometown, and among their own kin, and in their own house." And he could do no deed of power there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and cured them. And he was amazed at their unbelief. Here ends today's reading.
Thank you for your presence here today. And Patty, thank you for your advice, because this microphone is even with papers, not my mouth. In the scene described in today's scripture passage, Jesus has returned home to speak in the synagogue and is quickly forced to face the hostile constraints of familiarity. His audience sees before them a hometown boy, known, common, ordinary, just like themselves. They're surprised by the wisdom of his words, and they are confused, and they are offended that this ordinary fellow has the audacity to speak with such authority. How dare this son of a carpenter pose as a prophet? Now, when it comes to our understanding of and relationship to holy people, sacred places, spiritual artifacts, many of us feel more comfortable with a bit of distance ourselves, don't we? After all, aren't sacred and ordinary opposites? Aren't they? Isn't the numinous meant to be rare and mysterious and magnificent? When it comes to an understanding of and a relationship to the sacred, to people, to holy people, places, events, objects, many of us feel a bit like the Nazarenes. Though it would seem that we would trust that which we know most intimately, a neighbor, a family member, a friend, we seem to trust that which is a bit beyond our ordinary knowing or sensing. We want holy ones to step up on a pedestal. There do I look holy. A few steps above. We need them to be exceptional, above our reach. And if one of our own, through a profound wisdom and courage, the courage of a public voice, attempts to do this, we begin to distrust them, to resent them, wondering just who the heck they think they are. Now, if their prophetic words speak against the status quo that is serving us well and comfortably, or if they threaten our place in the social order, we can grow downright angry. If these familiar prophets have already exited this earth, safely in the grave, we go much easier on them. We might even recognize their saintliness. Somehow it's easier to accept prophecy from the distance of history. Yeah, because we knew what came of it, right? For instance, those who many years after their deaths were named saints by the Catholic Church had almost always been terribly abused by their contemporaries and the people in power in church and government for the challenges that they posed to the hypocrisy of their day. Why were Jesus' fellow Nazarenes so full of resentment at his presence and words? Perhaps Jesus enraged these religious leaders because he told them that they did not actually know what they thought they knew. We don't like to hear that, do we? But as the meaning of their lives and their work depended on the structures of what they knew, what and how they knew, they could not abandon these structures. There were holy men and kings and nobility and merchants and warriors and laborers, and Jesus was the latter, a laborer, a carpenter. Accepting him as holy emptied his neighbors of their certainty about law and tradition, social status, and the nature of God. Accepting Jesus as holy would have left an intolerable void in their lives. They wanted to cling to the structures and hierarchy that were understandable to them. The trouble is that what they believed to be the whole picture was only a tiny part of it. I hope we've read ourselves into this. Anybody kind of doing that a little bit? Our history, or even ourselves personally. How much we depend on how we know things to be. Perhaps it was slavery in the mid-1800s. You know, you can look back with a lot of, and you should look back critically of that, but you also see an economy that was built, a whole livelihood that was built on that structure. It was a difficult time in our country and the time of Ralph Waldo Emerson's life. Though many of us imagine the holy is untouchably beyond us, most of us nevertheless yearn for a God who is accessible to us personally, a relationship with a God that is warm and intimate and felt in the center of our being. What a friend we have in Jesus, right? We want to feel that connection. In her beautiful book, Belonging, Topapa Turner has a chapter entitled Holy Longing. Now, bear with me, this is a little tricky, it's a little paradox, but it's good. Here she speaks of holy longing as an ache for something deeply familiar and yet entirely unknown. A longing for a home we have always never known. She uses the imagery of the Sufi poet Rumi, who sees longing as a divine inclination, drawing us toward what is beloved. She says this: Rumi believed that what you seek is seeking you. In his poem, The Reed Bed, he speaks of our separation from the holy. He tells of the paradox of being human. Like the reed who is harvested from the reed bed, we are separated from the divine in order to take part in incarnation. Only in that tearing away from the beloved can the reed become a flute, making the beautiful music of longing, aching for the return to the bed from which it was plucked. Rumi said, the reed is hurt and sad, combining intimacy and longing for intimacy. One song. We can only ever come to intimacy through longing, the longing which arises from distance. Well, this experience of longing, I know, I remember when it first hit me that this longing was not a negative thing. It wasn't unfulfilled desire, an unfulfilled goal that, oh, I wish we could get to that. It wasn't something disturbingly bad, but longing is a powerful and affirmative human experience. The message of the image of the harvested reed made into a flute is that the object of our spiritual longing will come from this distance beyond us to meet us. God comes to us. The distance is necessary to our longing, and yet even so, we know deeply that we are already part of it. It's a greater wholeness than we will ever fully understand. Still, we experience its invitation and we feel the sacred reverberation in our lives. Like music, it crosses the great expanse between ourselves and that which encircles us, the air, the clouds, the stars, the heavens. Like the flute cut from the reed bed, our lives resonate with the music of longing. Now, when you reflect on it a bit, you can imagine how each of us, with our own windpipe, which we haven't gotten to use very much in the beauty of music and vocal music for quite a while, is a flute vibrating in song, in worship of this mysterious war, sounding forth with praise and lament and joy and hope and gratitude with an aching desire for the holy. I felt that. I felt that just now. Mine eyes have seen the glory. Oh, huh? Just, I get goosebumps up my head. My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. I just wanted to sing so bad. So we've got that all ahead of us. Jesus is a central image of that vibrating song for Christians, even now, 2020 plus years later. He's an incarnation of the divine, which reminds us of our own incarnation of the Spirit. But to the Nazarenes, he was merely one of them, and to claim more was offensive, not only to them personally, but I believe to God. It was sacrilege. Our longing requires distance in order to feel intimacy with the divine. Sometimes we confuse this need for distance with the imposed distance of formal religion, of dogma, of recognized authority, of ecclesiastical hierarchy. The distance we long to have reverence for and want to be humbled in the face of lies in what we know can never be known about God. The mystics throughout time, through experiencing complete devotion, through the intimacy of their visions and their prophetic revelations, were nevertheless, despite their visions and prophetic revelations, nevertheless were profoundly humble, almost to a one, about what they could never fully know about God. In fact, a book on Christian mysticism written by an anonymous author in the late 14th century was entitled The Cloud of Unknowing. Its message was that if one is to know God, he or she must let go of one's mind and ego and the attempt to name God's attributes and actions, and to be open to the realm of unknowing. Only then may we begin to glimpse the nature of God. Well, in the provincialism of the ancient Nazarenes and in our own, we may also mistakenly assume that if something is not rare, well, it is not valued, it's not precious. That if it's not magnificent, that it cannot be holy. And yet we have to look only into the eyes of an infant, one of 385,000 born each day around the world, to know that that which is present, precious, need not be rare, need not be in short supply. That which is holy need not be majestic or invulnerable. Returning to that image of the of the reed flute, the music of our longing breathes out toward the Great Spirit who is breathing into our spirit. Ruach, Ruach, the Spirit. The triune God is sacred breath bringing life to life. The holy is both familiar and unknowable. It's wise and innocent. It's powerful and vulnerable. It's intimate and distant. So as the church moves onward into an unknown future, following this imposed separation and isolation created by the pandemic, perhaps, as we see in many ways the silver lining, we're looking for the silver lining, perhaps a deeper understanding of holiness can emerge from that imposed exile of sterile, distant theology and churchiness into a promised land of shared intimacy. In this promised land, we can embrace the joyful existence of spirit-filled lives, recognizing, supporting, and sharing the divine gift of life on earth together. Amen.